I'm just now starting chapter 6 in Today and Tomorrow, and here are some of the best ideas I've come through so far. Um, in our own production, we set ourselves tasks. Sometimes we arbitrarily fix prices, and then invariably we are able to make them. Whereas if we merely accepted things as they are, we should never get anywhere. I like this. It's like set yourself the challenge of doing something before you even think it's possible for you to do it, and by trying to do it, you're gonna figure out how. And it kind of goes like the number of people that I've recommended start wrestling or jiu-jitsu or any sport for that matter, and they're always like, well, I need to get into shape before I can do that. Or I've even told some people they should go to the gym, like my friends, and like, well, I want to get in shape before I do it. I'm like, what? No, dude, you go to the gym to get into shape. It's like this quote from some sermon I was listening to, and it's like people think they need to make themselves perfect to become Christians or to accept Jesus into their life. And it's like, no, you accept Jesus into your life, and then through doing that, you are able to start building up from there. It's like getting the idea backwards, kind of. I'm gonna find another idea that I like. Here we go. It is one of the oddities of business that a man will cite what he had done in the past as proof of what he can do in the future. The past is only something to learn from. I kind of agree with this. I mean, if someone has won in the past, or if someone has overcome challenges in the past, that's a pretty good indication of their ability to overcome challenges in the future. Not necessarily within the same field even. Like, I've talked to my boss and people who do hiring, and they talk about how what they look for is like people who achieve high-end levels in sports. Like, that's dedication and perseverance, and those things will allow you to overcome other obstacles. The Ronnie something, I think, is a bodybuilder. He talks about how bodybuilders have a really good time of going, like, easy transition afterwards of going into business because they have the discipline of being able to watch what they're doing and set themselves to the right tasks so that they can become successful. So even though the past is only something to learn from, if someone's never succeeded at something in their life, it's a good indication, I believe, that they won't be able to succeed at something in the future. But if that's just the way things have done, or the way the business has operated in the past, that's not necessarily how it has to operate in the future. I think he's more talking about this in a business sense, whereas I'm trying to take his things about business and apply them to business, but also personal philosophy. Here's a great quote that he has. So in order to produce the cars, he kind of vertically integrated everything. So he bought the coal mines, so that he then cut out the people selling him coal and the profit from that and passed it on to the consumer. So when he bought those coal mines, he had to build villages or towns at those sites in order to get workers to live there. So he said, we do not paint to cover up dirt. We paint white or light gray in order that cleanliness may be the order of things and not the exception. And I like this idea of setting up your environment in order to succeed and having it communicate what you believe in. So by painting the houses white, he would see any coal dust on it. He would see any dust escaping from the mine, and this would be an indication of things not going the way he wanted, but also it sends the message to his workers of cleanliness as an important factor, as something that is valued, so that they'll speak up when they see something unclean or a way to improve the system. Here's also a nice quote he has. In scrapping the old ideas, one of the first that we need scrapping is the notion that because manpower is cheap, developed power need not be used. Labor is not a commodity. A while back, one of the jobs I was working at, they described the work they had to do in terms of man hours when billing, and I never liked the idea. It always made me feel a little cringy that like they're quoting projects in terms of the number of man hours and then putting a price on it. I'm like, that's like, it's just like time being the most precious of all commodities, and the fact that you're buying it from someone else and then quoting it out to people like this is going to cost 4,000 man hours to do it. I just don't like that. Like, I really don't like that idea because it doesn't necessarily imply any need to innovate when you're directly billing for the man hours instead of for the service itself. In another quote, he also talks about what I would consider similar to George Mack from the Modern Wisdom podcast. He talked about first principles and kind of getting back to them, like looking at how something's done, and then not necessarily just adding motors and adding power to make the way that's currently made use less manpower, but instead looking back on the first principles, breaking it down to what you actually need to get the job done, how it's actually performed, and seeing if there isn't another way altogether to go about solving the issue. And it's kind of like the idea of, instead of motorizing the rake, we came out with the leaf blower, which allows for like such a higher capacity of leaves moved. And for anyone living where the trees change and drop the leaves in the fall, they can attest to this. And with that being said, it brings me to the end of some of the quotes that I found interesting in chapters, I think 4 through 5. And I just want to recommend this book. It's a great read. And for anyone who wants anything else, go to eBay, buy used books there. I always like getting the hardcovers, but it's one of the most beneficial ways I found of falling asleep at night is just reading a chapter or two, getting off the screens. And then I've also found, since reading more, my dreams become more vivid. And I had a video at this a while back talking about how when you limit screen time, I'm not sure if it's that you remember your dreams more or if your brain actually makes them more vivid, but it's extremely enjoyable. So I'm actually going to be looking into the ideas of how to remember my dreams more so that it's not necessarily dreaming, but more so a second part of the day where I enter an alternate reality that I could do, like, say I could use that time consciously to actually think about concepts I wanted to think about. I would love to do that. And not necessarily saying that dreams or sleeping is a waste of time, but if I could find a way to utilize that time and have more control over it, I think that would be like a complete untapped source of just time you could buy back, energy, thoughts that you could have. And I'm going to be looking more into that, so stay tuned.